You might be living your life based on a story you made up about yourself years ago. I'm awkward. I always mess things up. People leave. I'm just not that kind of person. And the scary part? You've repeated the story for so long. You stop noticing it was a story. It just feels like you. Maybe yours started with something small. You were 12. You said something in class. Everyone laughed. You went home embarrassed, and somewhere inside your brain, a tiny sentence appeared. I'm awkward. Nobody officially told you that. Nobody handed you a document. There was no meeting. You just felt embarrassed, and your brain needed an explanation, so it made one. I'm awkward. Then a few months later, you said something weird at lunch, see? More evidence. Then you got nervous talking to someone you liked. Obviously. That's just who I am. Years pass. Now you're an adult walking into a room full of people you don't know. And before anyone has even met you, you already know how the night is going to go. You'll probably be quiet. You'll probably say something stupid. Everyone else will connect more easily. So you stay close to the person you came with. You don't introduce yourself to that person across the room. You leave early. Then you get home and think, see, I'm terrible at meeting people. The story predicted what would happen, then quietly helped make it happen. Maybe your story is different. Maybe yours is, I'm lazy. You procrastinated in school. Your room was always messy. Maybe somebody called you lazy enough times that eventually you stopped arguing. So now, whenever you struggle to start something, there it is, of course. I'm lazy. You don't ask if you're overwhelmed. You don't ask if you're exhausted. You don't ask if you actually care about what you're trying to do. You don't ask if you're afraid of doing it badly. You already have the answer. Lazy. One word. Whole explanation. Or maybe your story is, I'm always behind. That one can sneak up on you. You open your phone. Someone bought a house. Someone got engaged. Someone got promoted. Someone is in Italy for some reason. And you're sitting on your bed eating cereal at 9:30 at night, wondering if you remembered to pay your electricity bill. And suddenly, your life feels wrong. You start doing math. They're 27. I'm 29. He already did. By my age, I thought. And just like that, your life stops being a life. It becomes a race. Except nobody actually told you where the finish line is. Some stories come from relationships. Someone didn't choose you. And somehow, they didn't choose me became, I'm not the person people choose. Those are not the same sentence, but pain is very good at connecting things. One person lies to you. People can't be trusted. One friendship ends badly. Nobody stays. Someone makes you feel like you're too much. I'm too much. Someone else makes you feel invisible. I'm not enough. Then a new person comes along. A completely different human being. Different childhood, different personality, different intentions. But without realizing it, you hand them a role in a story they didn't write. You wait for them to leave. You look for the moment they change. A text sounds slightly different. There, I knew it. They take longer to respond. There, it's happening. Sometimes nothing is actually wrong yet. But your brain recognizes the plot, and it wants to get ahead of the ending. Maybe your story is about your family. You're the responsible one, the difficult one, the successful one, the sensitive one, the quiet one, the one who doesn't need help. Families are really good at assigning characters. And sometimes you were given your role before you were old enough to question it. Maybe you were the calm kid. So now you feel uncomfortable needing support. Maybe you were the smart kid. So making mistakes feels strangely threatening. Maybe you were the easy kid, so saying no feels selfish. Maybe you were always the one making everyone laugh. So now you don't know what to do when you're the one who isn't okay. The role worked, until it didn't. But you kept playing it. And then there are stories about what you're capable of. I'm bad with money. I could never run a business. I'm not creative. I'm terrible at exercising. I'm just bad at relationships. I'm not disciplined. I could never move somewhere alone. I'm not confident. Sometimes these sentences are based on evidence. That's why they're convincing. Maybe you really did quit 3 things. Maybe you really did make terrible financial decisions. Maybe your last relationship really was a disaster. Maybe you tried something and failed spectacularly. That happened. But watch what your brain does next. Something happened. Then something you did becomes something you are. I failed becomes I'm a failure. I made a bad decision becomes I make bad decisions. I was scared becomes I'm not brave. And now the past isn't just something that happened. It becomes a prediction. Your brain loves stories because stories make the world easier to understand. Imagine having to reevaluate everything about yourself every morning. Am I shy today? Am I confident? Am I good at this? Can I trust people? What kind of person am I? That would be exhausting. So your brain builds shortcuts. It takes experiences, finds patterns, but creates explanations. That's useful. If something hurt you before, remembering it can protect you. If you failed because you didn't prepare, remembering that can help next time. The problem starts when your brain turns a pattern into an identity. Because identities are sticky. Once you believe something about yourself, you start noticing evidence that supports it. Say you believe, nobody really cares what I have to say. You're talking in a group. 3 people listen. 1 person looks at their phone. Guess which one your brain remembers later. The phone, of course. Nobody cares. Or maybe you believe I always mess things up. You do 20 things correctly at work. Nobody says anything. Then you make one mistake. There it is. Proof. You go home thinking about the mistake. Not the 20 things that went fine. Your brain isn't necessarily lying to you. The mistake happened. The person looked at their phone. The relationship ended. You failed the test. The problem is what happens next. Your brain takes a fact and builds a meaning around it. Facts and stories can look almost identical. That's what makes this hard. Fact: they didn't text me back today. Story: they're losing interest. Fact: I didn't get the job. Story: I'm not good enough. Fact: I spent Saturday doing almost nothing. Story: I'm wasting my life. Fact: my friend has been busy lately. Story: we're growing apart. Fact: I don't know what I want to do next. Story: everyone else has figured life out except me. See how quickly it happens? Something occurs, and almost instantly, your brain starts narrating. The story then changes how you behave. If you believe people eventually leave, you might protect yourself by never getting too close. If you believe you're bad at something, you might avoid practicing it. If you believe you're behind, you might rush into choices you don't actually want. If you believe you're difficult to love, you might tolerate relationships where you receive very little. If you believe you always fail, you might quit early so failure hurts less. Then your behavior creates new evidence. You avoid people. You feel lonely. See, I don't connect with people. You don't apply. Nothing changes. See, people like me don't get opportunities. You never say what you need. Nobody gives you what you need, see? Nobody understands me. And the story gets stronger. Not because it was destined to be true, because you started organizing your life around it. There's another reason old stories survive. Familiar doesn't always mean good. Sometimes it just means familiar. A painful explanation you've believed for 10 years can feel safer than a new possibility. I'm just not confident. Okay, at least you know who you are, but imagine saying, maybe I could become confident. Now there's uncertainty. Maybe you have to try things. Maybe you have to be seen. Maybe you have to risk being embarrassed again. The old story limits you, but it also protects you from finding out what happens without it. That's why changing how you see yourself can feel surprisingly uncomfortable. You're not just changing a thought. You're stepping outside a character you know how to play. But here's the part we forget. The person who created some of your oldest stories was you. A younger you. A you with less information. And less experience. Fewer examples. Maybe a 12-year-old version of you decided you were awkward. And now a 30-year-old is still following the conclusion. Maybe 17-year-old you decided you weren't smart because you struggled in one class. So maybe 22-year-old you decided you were bad at relationships after your heart got broken. Maybe 25-year-old you decided you had ruined your career because your first plan didn't work. That version of you wasn't stupid. They were explaining life with the information they had, but they didn't know everything that would happen next. They didn't know you yet. Not this version. You're allowed to update the story when you get new information. We do this with everything else. You thought you hated a certain food. Then you tried it again. Turns out you like it. You thought you wanted a certain career. Then you experienced it. Turns out you don't. You thought someone was intimidating. Then you talked to them. Turns out they're lovely. New information. New conclusion. But when it comes to ourselves, we're strangely loyal to old information. I'm bad at public speaking. When did you decide that? Middle school. You're 34? Maybe we can run the experiment again. And changing your story doesn't mean lying to yourself. You don't have to stand in front of a mirror saying, I am the most confident person alive. Especially if part of you immediately responds, no, you're not. You can start smaller. Instead of, I'm awkward. Maybe I get nervous around new people sometimes. That's different. One is an identity. The other is an experience. Instead of, I'm lazy. Maybe I have trouble starting things when I feel overwhelmed. Now there's something you can work with. Instead of, I always choose the wrong people. Maybe I've chosen people who weren't right for me before. Before. That little word leaves room. Instead of, I'm behind. Maybe, my life doesn't look the way I expected it to look yet. Again, room. You don't need a completely new story tonight. Maybe you just need to become less certain about the old one. What if you're not bad at making friends? What if you've been scared? What if you're not lazy? What if you're tired? What if you're not terrible with money? What if nobody taught you? What if you're not unlovable? What if that person simply wasn't capable of loving you in the way you needed? What if you're not behind? What if you're just looking sideways too often? You don't have to believe the new possibility immediately. Just make enough space for it to exist. And then look for evidence. Not fake evidence, real evidence you normally ignore. You say you never finish anything. Is that actually true? Nothing? Ever? You say nobody likes you. Nobody? You say you're terrible socially. Have you never had one conversation where you felt comfortable? You say you can't change. But are you exactly the same person you were 5 years ago? Probably not. Maybe you're still struggling with some of the same things. But look closer. There are probably ways you respond differently now. Things you tolerate less. Things you understand better. Things that used to destroy your entire week that now ruin maybe an afternoon. That counts. You can also stop using your worst moments as character references. This is something we do constantly. We remember the time we handled something terribly. The relationship where we became someone we barely recognized. The year we were completely lost. The months where we couldn't get ourselves together. And then we use that version of ourselves as evidence for who we are forever. But you wouldn't do that to someone else. Imagine your friend saying, I made a terrible decision when I was 21. So obviously that is my personality forever. You'd probably say, you were 21, but somehow when it's you, the prosecution never rests. Maybe that version of you deserves context too. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they didn't know better. Maybe they were trying to be loved. Maybe they were surviving something. Maybe they simply made a bad choice. You can take responsibility for something without turning it into your identity. And some stories need to end because the situation that created them ended. Maybe you learned to stay quiet because speaking up caused problems at home. That made sense then. Maybe you learned to keep everyone happy because conflict felt dangerous. That made sense then. Maybe you learned to expect disappointment because disappointment happened often. That made sense then. Your brain was adapting, but sometimes we carry survival rules into places where we no longer need them. You're in a new room now, with new people, new choices, more power. But part of you is still following the old script. Stay quiet. Don't ask. Don't trust. Don't fail. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't need anyone. And maybe the question isn't, what is wrong with me? Maybe the better question is, when did I learn that I had to be this way? And do I still? Because you're going to collect more evidence. Tomorrow, you will have experiences you haven't had yet. You will meet people you don't know exist. You will learn things you currently think you're incapable of learning. You will handle situations that you would swear you couldn't handle. You'll probably fail at some things too. You'll embarrass yourself. You'll make decisions you wished you could undo. And those moments will become part of the story. But they don't have to become the title. Maybe your story used to be, I'm scared of everything. And eventually it becomes, I'm scared of things, and sometimes I do them anyway. Maybe people always leave becomes, some people left, some stayed. And I'm learning the difference. Maybe I wasted years of my life becomes, I spent years figuring out what wasn't right for me. Maybe I don't know who I am becomes, I'm still finding out. That last one feels different, doesn't it? The situation hasn't even changed. You still don't have all the answers. But one story makes you feel trapped. The other leaves the door open. Your past can explain you without defining you. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen. It happened. Some things changed you. Some people hurt you. Some choices cost you time. Some experiences left marks. But explanation is not destiny. You can say, that is why I became this way. And still add, but I don't know if I need to stay this way. Maybe that is what changing really looks like. Not waking up one morning as a completely different person. Just catching yourself halfway through an old sentence. I could never, actually, have I tried? That's just who I am. Maybe, or maybe that's who I've been. There is a difference. There's probably a sentence you've been saying about yourself for years. Maybe you barely notice it anymore. It shows up automatically when you make a mistake, when someone rejects you, when you look at somebody else's life, when something doesn't work. There it is. The old story. Maybe tonight you don't need to replace it. You don't need to become a new person. You don't need to convince yourself that everything you believed was wrong. Just notice the sentence and ask yourself, when did I start believing this? Who was I then? What had happened to me? And is it still completely true now? Maybe some of it is. Maybe some of it isn't. Maybe you've changed more than your story has. Because sometimes we grow and forget to update the way we describe ourselves. You are still using words written for a version of you that doesn't fully exist anymore. So maybe give yourself permission to edit. Not erase. Edit. Keep what's true. Add what you've learned. Change what no longer fits. Leave a few pages unfinished because you don't know everything about yourself yet. There are still places you haven't been, people you haven't met, things you haven't tried, versions of you that have never had a reason to exist yet. And maybe one day, you'll do something that the person you are today would never believe you could do. When that happens, let it count. Let it become evidence too. Your past already got to write a lot of the story. It doesn't have to write the ending. Stories can change, and so can you. If you like these little conversations about the things we carry around without realizing it, you can subscribe. Panqui will be here. And until next time, maybe question one old story you've been telling about yourself. It might not be as permanent as it sounds.